Do us a quick favor, guys. Hit the follow, subscribe button. Share this with someone who would benefit from it. And help us grow, as the more we grow, the better the episodes will get. Thanks, guys, for helping us. And let's get into the episode. Welcome back to this episode of the Sculptor Podcast. Today, we are joined by Jon Altringer, who is a sports journalist. And it will be an awesome topic to discuss because we've only had one sports journalist on before who's more of a TV presenter, Simon Hill in the A-League. And that was really cool to actually hear the sports perspective from a different view. And I really want to get into that a little bit more today with Jon. So, Jon, if you wanted to give a quick introduction to who you are, to our guests, and what you do, that'd be awesome.
Well, basically, what's happened is I originally interviewed Nicholas first for my one of my LinkedIn newsletters. I found Nicholas quite interesting in what he was doing with LinkedIn and how quickly he had built his followers and his profile. So I reached out to Nicholas and we started sort of collaborating. So earlier this week, I published my newsletter on Nicholas, and you're more than welcome to read it beyond the profile. But I also run a sports business, and I do a bit of, maybe what you would call journalism. Originally, I'm from the U.S., the United States, and I started a business back in 2020 during COVID, and it's called US of Sport, right? PTY Ltd. I coach multiple sports, so I coach a lot of basketball and a lot of the fundamentals of basketball. I don't know if Australians will like this, but I feel like there's a level of, without insulting anyone, there's a lack of foundational skills often. So I do a lot of that one-on-one skills work with young kids, boys and girls, because basketball is really growing. And I also am a coach for tennis, a development coach for tennis. So that I can coach adults, kids, hot shots, all the stuff that Tennis Australia has implemented. And I also am a basketball New South Wales coach as well. So that's a bit of the background on myself. What I was noticing through US of Sport was, there's so much information now on sports, and it's disparate. And I don't know if you follow Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
Well, they just sacked all their journalists like last week, and there's a lot of bad press around it. I always really loved Sports Illustrated. And so basically what I started doing was collating sports stories through a new LinkedIn newsletter, and it's called US of Sports Desk. And we do a lot of NFL. So right now, I'm very grateful that Taylor Swift is dating Kelsey, Travis Kelsey.
Yeah.
The two brothers, right? Do you know about these brothers?
Yeah.
And their podcast. I mean, honestly, sports is just going insane at the moment. I love it. It's great. I have to follow the NBA as well. I'm not the biggest, I have to be honest, the biggest NBA fan. But all the young kids, boys and girls, they just love it. They can't get enough. So it keeps me relevant. So I have to follow a lot of the NBA at the moment and the WNBA. Actually, I could go on and on about US sports, but I think I'd rather bore the audience. So hopefully that was a good enough introduction.
Yeah, awesome. So definitely covering a lot of different aspects of sports, and it's very interesting to hear the American perspective, because a lot of the time I see a lot of people from the UK coming over to Australia for football and soccer, because that's where, as you said, they lack the foundational skills. It's the exact same as soccer players here. We lack these foundational skills that in the UK, for example, they teach it since 4 years old, and we start when we're 13. So you do see a lot of UK people come over, but I honestly don't see too many people from the US come over, which is very interesting to also see your perspective on how basketball. Australia isn't a horrible basketballing nation.
They're not, and I believe their professional leagues are it's in either top 5 or 10.
Yeah,
of the best leagues in the world. in saying that, but you have a lot of imports. You have a lot of imports coming into play in the NBL, in the WNBL. So they're not all Australians. So, and you wouldn't expect that. But so I look at basketball right now. Do you know the sporting schools program?
No.
So it's where you can, the government issues the NSO's National Sporting Organization. And so like Tennis Australia, AFL is an NSO, right? A lot of all sports money here is funded through the government, and it flows through. It's too long to list, right? You can look this up on the clearinghouse. I think it's clearingHouseAustralia.com.au. I think that's the website. You can see the whole pyramid structure of how the sports is set up. Anyway, I'm digressing. So with the basketball, you're getting a supply-demand issue. The demand's so great, but the supply's the problem, meaning there's not enough gymnasiums here for all these kids. And this is not just in New South Wales or Victoria. This is pretty much everywhere. That's how popular this sport is with the younger generation. So I do feel that it's going to have even more traction soon.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I mean, the great thing about basketball, like soccer as well, is it's so easy for anyone to pick up, right? It's just a ball, which is why it's so popular.
So going off topic here, so US of sport, right? So I recently spoke to Wade Kelly. He's CEO of Gridiron Australia. And I interviewed him like I did you. I haven't published it yet. So the next big growth, in my opinion, coming out of US sports is flag football, gridiron. So they wear a flag on the side of their hip. And so it will be an Olympic sport in 2028. And I know Wade and his team, they're trying to grow that. So again, like soccer, all you need is a pitch or a grass field, and you can start running these tournaments, so to speak. But the growth in the US now is insane with flag football. So I think 2019 to late 2023, for females, it was 60% growth.
Yeah.
So it's a space to watch here.
Flag football, is that? I think that's what I would call OzTag. Is that right?
Well, I think OzTag's AFL, isn't it?
OzTag is where you've got two like flags on the side of your hips, and the opponent has to take one away.
Correct. But I think it's a different game. So it's where they're actually throwing the gridiron. So basically, what's going on is they're running routes, passing routes with defense, what we would call a cornerback or a safety, and he would either be a wide receiver, and they're throwing that ball to the receiver. I do think I don't know all the rules, and there's also a lot of running or what they would call scrambling, like the quarterback getting out of the pocket. So but it's interesting. Yeah, so it eliminates what they call concussion confusion.
Yeah, that's big.
There's not. It's a non-contact sport, so parents love that.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually one reason why I think a lot of people, why soccer in Australia has had a recent kind of boom, because it's always been rugby or AFL, depending on where you're based. And soccer's always the one. It's seen as like the baby sport in terms of you have to be a baby to play because you don't want to get hurt. But also, most parents probably would prefer their kids not to get hurt. Maybe there's a few exceptions, and maybe that's higher in Australia. But I think that's one reason why a lot of soccer became quite popular. And I'd say that it's probably still getting more and more popular, which is, it's.
I agree with you. I agree. It's soccer's and in the women and female teams are growing as well, and it's a great sport. I just never grew up with it, so it's very unfamiliar to me. And MLS, I believe MLS will be eventually the best league. Eventually.
Yeah, okay. It will definitely take some time because
it's going to take time, but I definitely believe that MLS, because the money they're just throwing at these, I know they're getting all the old, older players, Messi and things like that. But I do believe eventually these, they'll get onto some of these bigger contracts are going to start rolling over in the US, and they're going to get some of these bigger players. But the females, they're already leading it. Like the US teams and the NCAA soccer teams, female teams, they're already. They're producing these players.
Yeah, for sure. And it would honestly make more sense if America was the best in the world, because typically America is the...
Oh, I can't say that. I can't say that. But No, I'm just saying I do believe that just the way they run things over there, they'll get there. But I don't want it to. I don't want it to be a solely American thing. That makes we don't need that. We need competition. We need that. The Saudis will sort us out. They'll do something.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic at the moment for sure as well.
Oh wow, they've changed golf, and it's all happening.
Yeah, and I mean, even with the football, some things coming out of there sounds crazy at the moment. Players not getting paid millions that they're presumably on, and then I mean, of course it's a growing sport for them.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia actually is a historically pretty good nation for football.
Well, yeah, they've been in many World Cups, haven't they?
And they've always done like reasonably well for their size. But yeah, bit of a crazy one. I mean, football. I think that I'm sure it's the same that you've experienced there in all sports, that you're always seeing the highest of the high. You're always talking about your Lionel Messi's. You're always talking about your Cristiano Ronaldo's, Neymar's, whoever it is. You're always talking about the best. But this is 0.01% of the 0.01%. And people actually don't realize that for most footballers, I think it's 60% of footballers. There's a Fifth Pro article, which is like the organization who regulates all of it's basically global football. I think it's separate from FIFA, but they work in conjunction. And they released an article saying how all the stats on most players don't even get paid on time. I think it's like 60% of footballers earn, I think, less than $1,000 a month, which is ridiculous because when everyone thinks like soccer, football, they think, they're getting paid millions. But the reality is, no. My co-host who comes onto the episode sometimes, he actually was in a very, very tricky situation. I'm not too sure how much I can disclose there, but he was playing in the second division in Greece, and it is standard in this league for you not to get paid, which is ridiculous.
But this is where there's players' unions often are at the forefront of that. So you know, like the NBA players' union, the NFL players' union, and that's one of the reasons they have these, because you know it's a bit of a as in your words, tricky situation, not getting paid. You know, professionally, it's
very difficult one to manage. Definitely a very difficult one to manage. But let's get into a little bit more about yourself, Jon. So, I want to know, firstly, why did you come over to Australia? And expanding on that transition into what you're doing now as well.
Okay, so I met my wife originally in the United States, and then we moved back to Australia.
So she's from Australia?
She's Australian, yes. Okay. She was traveling with her brother at the time. And then we were here for a few years, and then we went and lived in London for 3 or 4 years. And then we came back, and I have a couple kids, teenagers, a 16-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son, and they play sport as well, tennis and basketball. And so hence the reason I moved to Australia, and we ended up staying. It's a pretty good country. So that's kind of the background. But I guess I worked in the corporate world for quite a long time in information technology. And I think a lot of that's changing now. I don't know all the, there's sec, I could DevOps, sec, there's so much terminology around all of it. But yeah, so I have a corporate IT background. I've worked for many companies. I've worked for banks. I've worked for property development companies, nationally, globally. So that's a bit of my background with technology. I still have my hands in technology a little bit, but not as much as I did. It's an ever-changing landscape, and I do believe, I'm going off topic here, but it's really gonna change when AI really lands. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So, came over to Australia. What age were you when you came over?
I was in my early 20s when I came over.
Oh wow, okay. So you've been here for how many years in total then?
I've been over 20, 22, 23 years here.
Wow, okay. So would that be half of your life then?
I've been technically, with my time in London and my time here, I've spent over half of my life overseas.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So getting into the sports journalism.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Is that purely only because you came to Australia, you've got the US sport background, obviously, in terms of your knowledge of basketball, tennis, all of these sports, and then realizing there's maybe a gap in the market? Or how did that even come about for you?
Oh, look, I just, I've probably seen a big change. As you're aware, I'm a little bit older than you. So let me give you an example. We know the Super Bowl's coming on, right? It's only a couple weeks away, less than a couple weeks away. So when I originally came here, you would have to take a day off, right? Because the internet wasn't capable of what it is now. And you would have to go down to like Crown Casino or Star City or something to go watch the game. Well, that's all changed now. Obviously, like all the apps, back then it was a cable television through ESPN or something like that. Well, it's totally changed. And I believe it's changed how Australians view sport, because they can get, it doesn't have to be just from the United States. It can come from anywhere. It can come from Europe, South Africa with the rugby, whatever. It's just all on your phone or on your laptop, and we can consume it at pretty much any point in time. So, but now what I see is too much information, and I believe that will only grow. There'll be more information. So I try to look at it differently. I'm probably a little bit more mature in some ways. I could focus on one particular sport or this or that. But what I see is I try to look at the business side of sport. And so I have a business side in my newsletter. I try to look at the pop culture side, because I mean that's trying to invite everybody, not just sports heads. So I love this Taylor Swift stuff going on. It's just great for my stuff. I mean, but it's not that. It's just all the people are just doing so many unique things. And then I get into, okay, well, what's interesting? What are the trades in the, MLB, Major League Baseball? Because it's not really happening, but spring training's coming on. Things like that. So, then there's the MLS, then there's the NCAA. Now, the NCAA, do you know much about that?
Yeah, in terms of college?
Well, yeah, the college, yeah. So you've got your Div 1, Div 2, there's Div 3, all these different things, different divisions. But the interesting bit about that is it's all changing now. They've got transfer windows for guys and girls to leave, which
it's also
never happened
now, right?
This is all in the courts at the moment, right now.
Yeah,
they're trying to go. Are these people? Is this extracurricular activity or is this a sport? Are they? But because what people don't understand is a lot of these NFL programs, like say Michigan, the University of Michigan, they just won. I think they were 15-0. They just won. They won the entire competition, right? Those guys that program, I reckon would be over 200 million. Program. And that supports all the other, and the alma mater, all the stuff. So it's an interesting space to see. And Adidas, or I call it Adidas, you guys Adidas, at Nike, they're really getting into the NCAA and trying to get, all these players signed up with them. So there's money to be made in there. And I actually think they are athletes, and I believe they are a version of professional athletes. And I believe they should get paid. How that works with scholarships, because remember, they're getting paid, there's a deduction from that scholarship. So how it all works, it will be interesting.
It's such a crazy one, because you've got athletes. I think it was Patrick Mahomes before he went to the NFL. Oh no, it was it was an NBA player, I think, who got drafted at quite a young age, who was playing college basketball, he was earning the off sponsorships and etc. the college millions of dollars every single year, but never saw a penny of it. Now I do think that there were people who actually got paid under the table for some of the stuff they did in some college instances for people who are earning millions, but that it's such a quick transition to professional sports that they're at that level anyways. I think it's kind of crazy that they're not getting paid for that work. And when I've got I know a guy who, one of my old goalkeeper friends, he actually plays for Penn State, and that's massive. Like, they've got their NFL games are crazy. It's just a whole stadium full of white. Like, it's ridiculous. It's so big over there, and it's a good level. It's a good level.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. It's changing. It's changed in my lifetime, but this year with the transfer windows, I'm kind of excited for the change. Maybe a younger version of me wouldn't be so excited, but hey, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. So going into how you got into sports specifically, what was that? What made you get into sports?
Oh, look, I played sports pretty much my entire life, very young. I started with like what they call T-ball, and I did soccer at a very young age. But then there was no soccer program after the age of like 8. So then I played gridiron, but I didn't have the size or speed for gridiron, but I did play. I was okay. But yeah, then you get to there's just levels to the U.S. sport, right? So I went through, we have like a freshman high school. Have you people gone through this with you? So there's like freshmen, then there's like a junior varsity, and there's varsity. But within those teams, there's multiple teams. So there's like an A team, B team, and the people on the B team are trying to get up to the A team and be starters, which is totally different than this country. And a lot of what you do is linked through your school program. So I was a Falcon. That was the our mascot, and we travel.
American thing.
It is. But we would travel with our school and compete against, and we're going for, there's states, there's districts, and then there's states, and then there's nationals, and, it's a totally different setup. And we practice sometimes depending on the sport, you would practice at least 5 times once a week, sometimes more. And I just I don't see that level here. And I do think it's a bit shocking. So I was speaking with a Major League Baseball agent that I know out of Melbourne named Lynn, and he was saying that a lot of Australians have a tough time adapting to that because they go over to the NCAA playing a Div 1 school, and then they've got to practice 5 days, sometimes twice a day. Then they have to do their homework, and that homework to do sometime the following week. Yeah, and their whole scholarship depends on that.
So when you mean homework, When you mean homework, sorry, for the listeners who may not be familiar, you don't mean homework on the field or
this is
literal homework.
This is scholastic. This is your education.
They have to keep their education up at a certain standard to even play on the weekend, right?
So this Lynn chap that I know, he gets the phone call from the actual school when everything starts dropping.
Yeah.
So he's the go-between between the parents and the NCAA school. Yeah. And he's the one negotiating, like, hey, you got to keep your grades up. This is your responsibility. He said a lot of these kids have ended up losing their scholarship and must come home.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so going into how you cover major sports events and what that means for you, what interests you primarily? Is it the sport specifically? Is it, for example, Taylor Swift? Is it what interests you? What makes you cover something, and how do you actually do that in implication?
Well, look, the sports, it's always interested me. So I think there's probably some early programming. So I could walk past a screen, and it has the gridiron on, and I will I will have to catch myself and go, hey, John, you have other things to do, right? So, and the same thing with the basketball. I'm like, oh, what players are they running? I'm looking for, things that I would have been familiar with. The game's changed, back when I was there, it was a lot of, they didn't have these slant receivers, these small little guys cutting these angles. Same thing with the basketball, they're all through, the NBA's transformed what the NCAA did, with like UNLV in the early 1990s, late 80s with 3 points, your Steph Curry. It's just this 3-point game. And now that's sort of transferred into, the NBA. And what these guys are doing, shooting 40% on their threes. I mean, it's just silly. It's just silly. So look, I wouldn't say it was anything in particular. It's just what interests me. And I change it as well, because if I'm not getting, subscribers and followers, then I need to look at some of that. And, it's like, who is this newsletter for? Who am I writing this for? And I really want to bring in a female perspective. In fact, I have a couple females friends. They actually don't want me to say their names, he'll kind of go over it for me and go, would I be interested in this? Would I? So I want to have a balanced approach. Often I find with sports, it's just very male dominated. You know, yeah. So that's not my approach. I want a balanced approach, and I'd be like, hey, if I speak to my daughter, what do you think about this? Oh, yeah, I already know about Taylor. I already know she's doing this. So I'm like, okay, great. Dad's got this right. You know, I know that I'm checking a few boxes to invite sort of a balanced audience.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting to see that perspective. And when you said the first little bit, it made me think that I think that from what you said there, you have a big interest of the evolution of sports themselves, and you like observing how things have changed over time. For example, the difference in the NBA, the quality, maybe it's, you know, I mean, a lot of people say that Michael Jordan, if you put the Michael Jordan in from however long ago he was playing into today's NBA, he wouldn't even be there. Now, that's obviously very debatable, and there's no way of actually measuring that. But when you look at it in terms of football, the standard's just gone up every single year. Players are just getting better and better. And to me, that seemed like something that really interests you. And that maybe is that something that makes you want to get into the sports journalism even more, just seeing the evolution of sports?
Well, look, I'm a big believer in change. So there's a lot of people my age and a bit older that I find often get stuck, in particular with tennis. So there's a lot of former players, really good players, but, you know, and now they're on committees or associations, and they get a bit stuck in some of their old ways. But the question is the younger generation interested? They're the ones who are going to fill the shoes. And it's a real problem with tennis at the moment. It's just not there. Like they're not coming on like they were in the 80s or the 70s. And so it's something that they're going to have to focus on. I think the Saudis are really going to do another live style sort of tournament. They've just signed Rafael Nadal on as like a board member, I believe. So things are happening. The change is going to come. I just hope people are more open to change. But yeah, the NBA will continue to change. Yeah, and NFL is going to change. They brought in new rules. Same with tennis. Look at Live, PGA. At the PGA, what did they do? They've just done it where now players have equity in the PGA. So not only are they getting paid, now they possibly have, you know, right to ownership. So, but this is what changes here. It's happening. And look at the women. Like I haven't even touched on the women's sports. Like mind-blowing stuff from when I grew up.
Yeah,
very different. Like you know, I'll use the old terminology, and I know it's probably sexist, but they say, "Oh, you're throwing like a girl." But I mean, what some of these ladies are doing now, I mean, it's crazy. You know, in NCAA, football. Yes, So I think it's all really good. I try to look at it as a positive thing.
Yeah, I think that even when you look at the way that we've refined skill sets over time, it makes sense that there's such a steep improvement in, for example, all women's sports. There will be this massive improvement very, very quickly in women's sports. If you look at football, for example, the reason why America was probably ahead of every other country in the world in football, I believe, they started before everyone. Yeah. And that's the exact same as Australia. It's typically these Western countries which enabled the women to start before everyone, which means that they're further ahead. It's actually, if you look at the top 10 or even 5 women's teams in the world, pretty sure it's like Australia, Germany, France, and America. And they're, you know, some of the biggest Western superpowers in the world. Arguably, maybe Australia's not in there, but in terms of being at the forefront of, you know, being in even just capitalism and things like that. I mean, Australia and all these other countries, they give the equal opportunities, equal chances that is enabling women to have more and more of a chance in football. And of course, they're going to be more behind the men right now, but that's exact same as when the men started, when they were 5 years into playing professional football. Yeah. You know,
the Matildas have done more than any of the men's soccer have done here.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So, But a lot of those ladies went through, I'm sure they were through NCAA schools.
Yeah,
You know,
quite a lot do. Quite a lot
pathways
do.
programs. And that's something I would really, in time, something I really want to start doing. I want to do a little bit of merch.
Yeah,
When you're up for some collab.
yeah.
But I also want to start working on like player pathways programs. And I'm not talking about players pathways programs that go through the national sporting organizations here. I'm talking about, I'm sure the soccer players do, or football players, do a combine test, like.
We actually don't do anything like that.
Well, see, this is one of the things. So like I feel like there's a big space there, because that's a lot of people they're looking for the athlete,
Yeah.
and they think
to be honest, though,
skills can come afterwards.
To be honest, the only country that does that in soccer is America, and that not everyone does it. In terms of for football, so there's very mixed results with it, because with soccer, they don't see it as an so for example, in Australia, we kind of believe that our soccer players are athletes who then can kick a ball, basically. In Europe, you're a soccer player who's then turned into an athlete. That's one reason why we stay away from those kind of stats, because it's such a different skill set, football, and a lot of it is up here. And you've got really good athletes who can kick a ball well. Yeah, there's a lot of YouTubers who make a lot of money from kicking a ball well. Put them on a football field, and they will do absolutely horribly. They will look like
because there's a lot of movement in order to get to the kicking the ball.
There's a lot of different things, but it is definitely an interesting topic.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah,
and this is a question that I find upsets a lot of soccer people, but I would love to try it for 1 year.
Okay,
move the offsides.
Okay, that's never gonna work.
Oh, because I look at it from a probably American point of view. Like
you want to see more goals.
When the scores were like, so let's go back to the NBA in the 90s, right? And it's like 88 to 92. And now we're getting like 146 to 148. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is I would love an experimental offside, get rid of the offsides just as a trial and just watch these goals explode. And then be looking at pure speed, because these guys, you know what I mean? So anyway, that's my dream. I know footballers are like, go away. So there you go.
I think the reason why probably I'd be more like pretty far away from that is because I think you say that to a striker and he'll be like, oh yeah, I get it.
You can always add another goalie. You might need 2 goalies.
I've tried that before. It's the worst thing in the world, doing 2 goalkeepers. But I think the only rules that may change with football, I'm gonna be more like to be fair, football's been around for so long that the game's like at a point where it's like kind of just hard to evolve. I think the most let's say malleability around football and the rules there is in terms of set pieces. I think you can manipulate them a little bit more to make it more of a, like, I know that I've heard like Americans talk about why they don't like soccer, for example. It's because it's such a low scoring game, which I understand why that could be boring, because like basketball.
Yeah.
For soccer, the Europeans, and obviously I've lived in Europe. I know what it's like to understand what football is to them. Football is not just about the goals. It's about everything that led up to the goal. It's about all the times that you failed. It's about all the times that you tried to make this pass and it didn't work 9 out of 10 times, but that one time that it did, everyone was on the same page and you scored the goal. That is where they see that joy. And I don't know if that's maybe, an old way of thinking to where, you earn your joy. Everything you do is like, you earn it. It's all about this difficult time. It takes time, patience. And I think that's where football, people find joy in that rather than the goals. And then the people who do want the goals.
But the audiences as well dictate. So the soccer and football audience is still growing and very strong. So look, this is just me speaking and my wish. But look, you got football is in no issues, at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's not really a concern. But for example, tennis, it is struggling in its own way. And I know they're looking at like getting rid of lets and also, Craig Tiley just came out after the AO and was saying, do you know what a lead is? It's where it's and it bounces, it goes in, and they give you the, a first serve again. Well, they're just saying, to speed up the game, things like that. So it's all like, all these things are happening. I feel there's a lot of change. I think people are open to change. But I wait, one thing on that. The NHL, the hockey, I believe they got rid of the offsides and those scores. So, and the audience numbers grew. But I mean, that would be to do with what's happening within the NHL. So, the audiences are being
also different. The reason why I think offsides are there in soccer, if you watch old games where they had no offside rules, they had I forgot what it's called, but you have like this guy who's just staying at the goal poacher. I don't remember what.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and then
so, but again, it would change it up. But look, I don't want to sidetrack you on this. Like, I was just not.
It is a cool topic to talk about, though.
I thought about it. I was like, let's do just 1 year and see, because like the records would just get shattered. I think just saying
it's almost like we're too deep in to change anything that's too drastic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because that's going to change up everything. Like the goalkeeper role has changed drastically in the past 10 years.
You'll need a guy who's 7'5".
Yeah, and also you're going to have to turn into a rugby player, because you're going to have to tackle the guys because they're moving, they're staying in one spot the whole game. The goalkeeper is going to become basically just another defender who's got hands, which arguably is also the case now. But it's going to have to be tackling everything. You can't have penalties. Like, it's going to be in an
alternate universe. This is happening.
It's happening right now, apparently. Yeah,
right now.
It's crazy. Now, going into the last kind of topic, where do you see the evolution of sports journalism going? Do you think it's going to go AI? Do you think it's getting easier, harder?
I mean, it's hard to validate I'm sure to validate some of the stories. And are people willing, to pay journalists? I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but I think these journalists will have to collaborate with AI. I'm a big believer in change and collaboration. So yeah, AI is here, and that will be part of it. But again, with AI, there'll probably be some misinformation as well. And as I said, that information's just, it's so instant now. So for me, it's like I do this this weekly newsletter, and a lot of my stories are old, but I try to do a bit of fact checking on them before as well. I just don't want to, just because something was released today doesn't mean I need to get it out as quick as possible. I do need to do a little bit of investigation and go, okay, is this really happening? Is this really the score? So yeah.
Yeah. And how do you stay at the front? How do you set that standard? How do you stay?
I don't necessarily. I have to be honest. I don't think I'm probably at the front. What I've done is as we've discussed earlier, I've kind of built my LinkedIn profile so to get a lot of the feeds, so to speak, from the actual teams themselves. So like, the New England Patriots or something like that. And then I can do the fact checking. But for me, it's like, this really is more probably a passion than I would say that I wouldn't necessarily say I'm the best at what I do. Yep. One thing we haven't touched on is I actually coach. So I coach a lot of grassroots. I'm a paid coach as well. But I to be honest, the kids were the ones who got me back into all this. All these kids I've coached here in Australia, just Australia alone, come up to me and go, "Oh, you're from the US. Hey, coach." And I go, "Okay, what does he want to know?" They start telling me about basketball. I'm like, "Okay." And then I'm like, "Well, your basketball's a little bit limited, and nobody's broken Wilt Chamberlain's record as of to date, where he scored 101 or 102, and there was no 3-point line. So, I have to fact check a lot of these kids on their knowledge of basketball, and like, okay, well, yeah, the Bulls were great in the 90s, and, now we had, but it's the kids who brought me back into all this, to be honest, the ones that I coach.
Yeah, okay. And why do you think that is what it took? Do you think it's because that the kids...
Well, I think it was always there. It was always banging around in the background, but I had a corporate career. I was doing other things. And then I started coaching, and I started spending a lot of time with, male and females, coaching both of them, whatever it was. And And they they're always like, oh, you're from the U.S. Can you tell me about this? Or you can tell me about that. And I go, oh, it's been a long time since I lived there. But yes, I explain, like the other day, somebody rang me to have me explain the offsides kick in the NFL. And why would someone do that? Or why would somebody go on fourth down? And I'm like, well, it's all to do with the clock. And they go, why is the clock stopping? Well, the clock stops on, whether it's an incomplete pass or so, it's just all these little things that I kind of forget that I know. So, yeah. And then I share that knowledge, and then who knows, maybe they take up, some flag football or something. I don't really advocate the tackling and all that. So flag football, there you go.
Yeah, awesome. Now, going into the final question for you, Jon.
Sure.
What are 3 ways that you sculpt yourself every single day?
The ways I sculpt myself, well, one, probably a lot of, I don't know if this is important, but for me it is, I do a lot of metaphysical work, some like meditation. Yeah. And I think that's what keeps me young and then open to change. So that's one. 2, I'm always coaching. And it's like I asked you, what am I doing or what are you doing for the next generation? Well, that's what I do for the next generation. So by me getting up and coaching sports, that's very important for me, is giving back to the next generation, right? And thirdly, just, spending time with my family and kids,
Yeah.
That's important. My kids are at this stage where they're about ready to leave the house. And I read something the other day about when your kids leave the house. It said something, you really only have 1 year in total for the rest of your life with you.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Yeah.
So if anyone's listening, take that on board.
Yeah. It's actually a crazy stat, because I remember seeing it put into like perspective of the most time that you spend with your parents is like now, and then the rest is, as you said, like very finite. Definitely a very crazy stat, and it's probably one that most people don't even think about at that type of level. Very, very hard to understand, because I mean, thankfully now, because of technology,
yes,
that connection's much stronger. That's what I really
well, I think COVID was, like a lot of people have, COVID definitely changed a few things, and I do feel that it gave people, if they choose, an opportunity to spend more time with their kids, but it's a choice.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And as I was just about to say, when I went to Germany for the first time, I think one reason why my parents probably let me go at such a young age, like I just turned 50, like that's ridiculous. When I look back at that, I think, I don't know why they let me do that. And technology definitely helped bridge that connection barrier that they never ever would have had. Like sending a letter. I remember my dad told me stories about when he lived in London by himself at like 19 or so, and is sending letters to his mum every 2 months, and it takes me literally a day to fly there, get back, and if I wanted to, like if anything was to go horribly wrong, which it, as I think we kind of discussed it did for me. And but even lower than that, I've got my phone here. Hey mum, how you doing? Every day, no problems. It is crazy. It's a crazy world we live in at the moment.
Oh yeah, look, there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Now I did have one question. So do you do any merch?
So this is crazy one, which you would find out after this episode. I send a little PDF to all the guests.
Yeah,
and it covers all the things that we're doing at the moment with Sculpted. Now I've got the Sculpted app that we have. This is currently in the works of being coded at the moment, and a part of this is called incentives. Right? If I paid you $1 million to do something every day, you'd probably do it, right? If I paid Elon Musk $1 million to do something every day, he probably wouldn't do it. So $1 million to you is, you'd do it. Well, obviously I don't know. I would imagine you'd probably do it. Most people would. So I'm all about incentives and incentivizing people. So part of the Sculpted app will be to incentivize people through clothing, merchandise, things like that. It's what I am planning on doing, because it's going to be a big part of incentivizing people to do things, working your way up, becoming better and better within the app, having that incentive there is a massive thing for us. But we don't want it just to be merchandise. We want it to be a clothing brand, so that if I see you wearing your sculpted clothing, I know that you haven't just bought it, you've actually earned it. So not everyone gets to wear it.
That's interesting.
If you wear it, you've earned it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
It's a big project. It's a big project.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. I'm sure.
Yeah. That's what I'm working on at the moment.
Okay. Good out. Who do you have? Is it an Australian team or you have overseas team, Deb?
So currently all Australian. I've got my COO who lives in Brisbane, and now we're just trying to finalize the contract with my CTO who lives in Sydney. So very exciting times, and yeah, a big project ahead, trying to get the investment and trying to get everything moving forwards.
Well, I wish you all the best.
Hopefully we can do something in the future together as well. It'd be awesome.
That sounds good.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for hopping on the episode today. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that the listeners definitely got something out of it as well.
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks to all the listeners, and go check out USSport.com.
Yes. I'll add the link in the description of this episode as well, and also I'll add the link to the article, the LinkedIn newsletter.
Yeah, and also the J Alt. Yeah.
Easy.
Thanks, buddy.